All right, Jeff, we just finished up watching the Sony press conference. A lot of big surprises in there.
Yep.
A lot of things that people thought were never going to happen.
Not just this year,
but ever.
but ever. Yeah.
I mean, like, not just like one or two, but three or four things that were kind of totally out of left field. Things that, as we talked about in our pre-show, had almost entered mythical status.
Yeah.
Some of those things I was bringing up in the pre-show were like just a lark that maybe, just maybe, we might get to see something of this or that.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of those things. Whether it stacks up to what Microsoft did earlier today, I think is something that we should talk about.
Yeah.
But let's start with some of the titles that were on display. They started out their conference with a game that was one of these total out of left field things that people keep asking every E3.
Yeah.
Hoping that they'll get to see another appearance of The Last Guardian. It never happens.
Yeah.
If it does, it's always this sort of like, well, we're still working on The Last Guardian. It's going to happen. It's just not happening right now.
And in hindsight, this ended up kind of being a tame one compared to some of the other more outrageous things that we weren't expecting at all. But they started with a pretty lengthy demo, an actual gameplay demo.
Right.
I think one thing that we will be talking about a lot here is compared to Microsoft didn't have a lot of actual gameplay demos, and we saw a lot of gameplay from Sony's games.
We did. Let's talk about Last Guardian a little bit. We got to see it on PS4. I mean, I think it was a safe bet that if we were ever going to see it, it wasn't going to be back on its original console of PS3. It was going to be on PS4. We got to see, is it Aobai? I think the Guardian. We kept hearing him, the little boy, shout that.
Yeah.
The Guardian coming out. Sort of this weird dog, bird, cat hybrid that makes dolphin noises. Pretty much all the things that you could do to make it look both extremely powerful and dangerous, and yet completely adorable at the same time.
Yeah. I was really struck by how much of a personality they kind of brought out in that, and that it seemed, like you said, even though it's enormous, it seemed kind of vulnerable in the environments, and the whole time I was like, oh God, no. Is he going to make it? He's going to make it.
Yeah.
Obviously, they wouldn't kill it in the demo, but I'm sure it's coming at some point.
They're
going to make us all cry.
You've heard it here first.
Yep.
Jeff calls it that beautiful, one-of-a-kind creature is going down. Yeah, I mean, I like that too. I liked that there was that personality. I liked the idea that it got to that one point and that weird totem was something that scared it.
Yeah, it was kind of freaking it out.
And I liked the depth that gives to the idea that there's a world that has existed prior to the game. There's something about what this creature's gone through that is terrified. We know that it's been injured. It's got arrows in it. And it has bonded itself with this child.
Yeah. Some of the gameplay mechanics kind of looked old school. There was the beam balancing section. Kind of pushing, repeatedly on that one structure. But what struck me also was how it wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to give this bird thing a command and it's going to blindly follow it. It was hesitant sometimes. You could see that you were kind of calling out to it. I don't know if that's an actual gameplay mechanic or not, but it kind of seemed like it still had its own personality and was kind of making its own judgment calls in a way.
Yeah. And a 2016 release date.
Yes.
Or so they say. But if they stick with that, that's great news. It's a game everybody's been waiting for a really long time. And they followed it up with a debut from a studio that we wanted to hear something from. We hadn't heard from Guerrilla since they released their last Killzone game at the launch of the PS4. And Herman Hulst took the stage to talk about what appeared to be a deeply distant in the future post-apocalyptic story.
Kind of prehistoric future game.
Yeah, exactly. Called Horizon Zero Dawn. This game seems to star a new protagonist, this redheaded woman who's moving through this world that seems to be hundreds, if not thousands of years after the fall of our civilization. Everything's sort of grown over, and the dangerous wildlife in the world are these robotic dinosaurs, which looked amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing that struck me about this one is that probably 20 seconds into that demo, it already felt like it had so much more personality than the Killzone series.
I agree. Yeah.
It had its own style. I've never seen a game like this. Robot dinosaurs, I guess you could say Transformers kind of has them, but certainly not like this.
Right. And I got a little bit of a kind of RPG vibe from it too. You know, there was this idea that you had these different weapons that you had that you were kind of developing. It seemed like it had a relatively open world kind of experience that you were playing around with. And so I'll be interested to see how it mixes what's clearly an action-focused mechanics with the potential for exploration, for crafting, for leveling up, that kind of thing. All that remains to be seen.
And it seemed like there were also other human factions out there too that didn't belong to the same as her. So.
Right, so there's these other tribes in the world. It seemed like a really big world that would be a really neat one to explore. I was really interested in some of the idea that there are these ways to bring down these creatures using native weaponry. Yeah. Right, and that she was using spears and like bungee cord arrows to pull down this like robotic T-Rex and pull it to the ground, and then there were weak spots that she knew about on the body that
like kind of slow motion slides and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Added a kind of cinematic vibe to the whole experience. I'm really stoked about that title.
Yeah. And it was another one that was gameplay as well. It kind of started out as more of a cinematic thing and then went directly into gameplay, which is super cool to see.
Definitely. We had a couple other debuts that followed up there with a new Hitman title from Square Enix, the return of Agent 47. I think we heard the phrase Agent 47 returns about 5 times.
Yeah, I didn't really even know that he went anywhere since the last game.
He's returned, Jeff.
I guess.
It's happened.
Yeah, but that was just CG.
Yeah.
Didn't really give us anything from gameplay. They did announce that there was going to be a beta specific to PlayStation 4 and some kind of bonus contracts.
Yeah, 6 contracts that are only on PlayStation. I thought I thought it was kind of an interesting trailer, but it was really confusing.
Yeah.
You had scenes on a fashion runway and some other guy who was like a businessman looking at money, and then he was jogging through the forest in the snow.
Yep. And I mean, those games always have very flashy CG trailers like that. You may remember the sexy nuns, I think, from the last game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Hitman series. That didn't really give me anything to go on, so we're just going to have to wait for actual information on that one.
Well, we already knew that Street Fighter V was going to be a PS4 or PC thing, so no big surprise there. That game continues to look great. Every time I see even Street Fighter 4 in action, that art style really blows me away. Street Fighter V continues to make major strides. There's going to be a pre-order option for beta access as soon as July 23rd on PS4. And so that's big news for Sony folks who are in the fighting game community. And that brought us up to No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
A lot of people hailed this as their game of the show last year at E3, and after seeing what they had to show tonight, I wouldn't be surprised to see more people say the same thing.
Yep. It was not the longest demo, but we got to see the ship combat, a little of the ship combat. That was the first time we saw that, and then on-ground shooting, and the big reveal of destructible environments, which I was not expecting at all. And it was a cool demo, just that if we take Sean Murray at his word that they just landed on a completely random planet, and that's always, I think, been the appeal of that game. You're just going to go someplace, no one's ever seen it before, it's all procedurally generated, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, it did indeed. And the idea that you would do that on an E3 stage in front of quite literally millions of people.
Yep. And
he had to be pretty confident that it was going to work out.
Yeah, they must be pretty happy with where that game is at this point.
Media Molecule took the stage next to talk about their new project. I was very pleased to see that we get to learn some more about what they've been working on. As you mentioned in the pre-show, the last we'd heard from them was that they were working on something related to user-created content at a previous E3, and then they just kind of went dark.
Yeah.
And then they came out and showed us what? Dreams? I don't know what this is.
Yeah, it's still super weird. You can kind of see the roots in what they had showed earlier. It didn't kind of have that painting aesthetic the first time, and they were using Move controllers, but you could kind of see that he was using the light on the PlayStation controller, or at least the motion, or the gyroscope or whatever it is, to kind of use that to move the characters around that he was making, kind of like a marionette puppet, they said.
Right.
And they said you could do animations and musical numbers and games, but we didn't see anything game-related from this.
Right.
So
there is the idea that you're moving through different people's worlds, though, their own
Yeah.
dreams, that you would kind of craft your own. But frankly, because I think a lot of people play those games, have played their previous work, and like Little Big Planet, played it just playing what other people created. There's a small community of devoted creators that grow up on these titles, and then everybody else takes advantage of their creativity, and that's fine. If there is a really strong community that builds there, we'll get to see some really unusual things and some really hopefully exciting inventions. But based on what I saw, I don't have any idea how it really works.
No.
What you're really doing. Clearly, you know, when they were on stage drawing this sort of old man into life that was sitting in the chair, and then we're bringing it to life with marionette controls, I was like, well, that's all well and good, but I don't know. That looks really complicated.
Yeah, and you could tell, he said you could do it in a matter of minutes, but you could tell they were fast-forwarding through how fast, you know, they were modeling the face and stuff. I don't know. I'm very intrigued. I always love what Media Molecule does, so I want to learn more, but that one is still a big question mark about what's going on with that.
Firewatch is going to be a console debut on PlayStation. This is the new game from Campo Santo. I liked what I saw of it. I like the focus on narrative, the conversation, the sort of back and forth between this man and woman discussing things, and just sort of the adventures that he's on. I suspect that there's going to be more to what's happening in that world than what is at first apparent.
Yeah.
But obviously that'll be part of what is the excitement of the game, and we won't find that out until the thing releases.
Yeah. I had read a couple of previews about that before that kind of emphasized that relationship, and I don't think I really got it until I saw that. And you could kind of hear the banter between them and say, okay, I can see how she's important to him. And I really like the art style too.
Yeah. There was a little game, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, it was called Destiny, I think, that showed up on the stage. What do you know about this title?
No, that was new to you, right, Miller?
New to me. What did you think? You obviously you don't play Destiny as much as I do, I think it's fair to say. Was there anything there that excited you about what they're doing?
It's cool that they're doing new content and that it's supposed to be, you know, the biggest update yet. But like you had mentioned, they didn't go into a lot of detail for that, and I kind of want to know. I think Adam Boyes actually said more about it when he said that there were new super abilities and stuff like that. So that's the kind of information that I want to see. I'm sure we'll learn more about it this week. But
yeah, there's some things that can be gleaned just from looking at the video that was out there. There are 3 new supers. A lot of it is confirming what an earlier leak had spoken about, which was that this is about the Taken King. This is a guy. This is Oryx, who's the father of the big boss from the previous expansion, who we took out.
Okay.
So he's ticked off now. There are, along with those 3 new supers, anybody who plays Destiny knows that means that there's 3 new subclasses, a new subclass for each of the games, filling in the extra element that everybody hasn't had yet. So, for instance, with the Warlock, that you saw that crazy cool electrical storm sort of force lightning action going on. That's their Arc subclass, which the Warlock has not had yet. There were, I think, some lingering questions, and even after this, there are some lingering questions about exactly what the Taken are, whether the Taken are a wholly new enemy group, or if we're just sort of recycling old enemies and bringing those guys in. It was a little hard to tell from what was on display. It looked like there were some new enemy types in there, but I couldn't tell for sure if those were just bosses or more genuine enemies.
I'm sure we're not going to see Andy for another month when that comes out.
Well, he and I play a lot of Destiny together late in the evenings, and so I suspect we'll have lots to say about it once the time comes. The continuing exclusive relationship thing is a big deal. There's new exclusive gear on PlayStation. They didn't talk, again, specifics about that. There's a new exclusive multiplayer map on PlayStation, and another exclusive strike. That is bringing the grand total of options that are on PlayStation and are not elsewhere pretty high. I think it's exciting for Destiny fans. As they said on stage, that's a hugely popular game, regardless of split opinion in the wider gaming community about what people like or don't like about the title. Having that exclusive stuff on Sony is a big get for the PlayStation brand.
Yep.
After the Ubisoft press conference, I had a lot of frustrations about not getting to see anything more substantial about the other protagonist.
Yeah.
Was happy that they put the focus on that character, and we got to see a little bit more.
Yeah, kind of the first real time, I think. I think the first reveal trailer didn't even show her. The session earlier today didn't mention her at all.
Right. She, in the original appearance, she was sort of just like off to the side of Jacob, which, you know, just seemed weird given the way they've positioned this title as being about two separate protagonists, that it's been until now that we've gotten the focus. And she looks like a really cool character, one that is an interesting counterpart to this sort of like gangster kind of character that we have with her brother.
Yep.
We have a kind of a more traditional assassin with Evie Fry that I think should be pretty cool.
Yeah. Not mentioning it earlier at the Ubisoft press conference makes more sense now. That they were clearly wanting to keep something special for PlayStation. It was, again, just kind of a trailer.
Yeah.
We didn't really get the longer gameplay demo that we were kind of expecting. But and then they announced that there was... new murder missions that were exclusive to PlayStation?
Dreadful crimes only on PlayStation. That implied that it was sort of related to like Sherlock Holmes.
I think so.
Kind of based around stuff related to Sherlock Holmes, but that's not entirely clear. We had 2 new Final Fantasy games on stage this evening at Sony. The first one, totally out of left field, World of Final Fantasy, this sort of chibi-style Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
What'd you make of this?
It was cute. I think that was the main takeaway from that trailer. That's another one that we need more information about what they're going to do with it. Final Fantasy has made some missteps. Sometimes they really understand what the fans want, so we'll have to wait and see where that one falls.
It's notable that one's on PS4 and Vita, which is great. It's great to see some support for Vita. We didn't hear a lot of talk about Vita. No. It's worth noting during this press conference. But it does set some expectations about the complexity of the game, and the tech that might be on offer in that game is probably not going to be at the same super crazy high tier that you would get if it was an exclusive PS4 title. The other Final Fantasy title, pretty much everyone had given up at this point on a Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, every year there's these sort of like rumors.
Yeah, the rumors
that go around that this is going to be the year that, but it's always wishful thinking. And I mean that for over a decade of following E3 press conference professionally. It's always been there of that talk about a Final Fantasy VII Remake. So the fact that Sony had that on stage for themselves, and that it's going to be first on Sony's platforms on PS4, I mean, that's a huge deal.
There's a reason they got the crowd riled up with that announcement. And then the one right after it, on the list of things we never would have guessed was going to happen, a Shenmue 3.
Yeah.
Not officially coming out yet.
Yeah.
It still needs to be funded. Like you said, I don't think that's going to be a problem for people. Finally, they're taking it straight to Kickstarter and saying, hey, you want it so damn bad, just give us some money and we'll make it for you.
Yeah. I mean, presumably they launched the Kickstarter. We should find out how much they're asking. I bet it's up now.
Yeah.
We've been in here looking at the press conference, and so we don't know. But I'm betting there is a page right now for Kickstarter.
If Kickstarter has not been completely broken by the amount of traffic that just flew to it.
I mean, it will be interesting to me. I mean, my first inkling was like, that thing's going to get funded in like 5 minutes. But I just don't know. It's such an old game now. And it's there's a really, really vocal community of people who desperately wanted to see that game happen.
Yeah.
So it was cool that Yu Suzuki was on stage launching this Kickstarter. Yep. It is representative, I think, if we take a step back for a moment, for the importance of Kickstarter, to see somebody going on the Sony stage to launch a Kickstarter, not even to talk about their indie game, but to talk about the game that they're going to try to fund through a crowdfunding campaign. It's a different era than a few years ago.
And that would be so appealing to Sony, too.
Yeah.
That they would say, oh, this is something that the fans are going to love. Let's show them this Kickstarter. Yeah.
I thought one of the odder appearances at this show was the Batman stuff.
Extremely dark.
Really dark. It opened with like the cremation of Joker.
Yeah. Up close of the face burning off.
Yeah.
Sure.
And follows up with this really bleak thing of a cop trying to do his job in a little diner, trying to be a good guy, and then just having this terrible...
And presumably slaughtering everyone in the diner.
Yeah, that's
right?
what was the implications, that he was going crazy and was actually just killing innocent people.
It did not make any sense until they said that it was Scarecrow missions, and I believe that's PlayStation exclusive.
That I don't know. I was trying to catch that, and they were panning the camera at the time, and I couldn't see exactly what was going on there. But presumably, yes, the Scarecrow Nightmare missions have some sort of exclusive aspect on PlayStation, but... Apologies, I'm afraid I don't know the specifics of how that works. So people are not going to have very long to wait for that game. Obviously, it's next week is a release, a huge title. There was some stuff with Project Morpheus, and I don't know about you, but I'm not totally sure they're winning that fight right now.
No, it was kind of just like, hey, look, we have a ton of games coming to this.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is it's really hard to demo VR.
It is.
So they didn't want to show... They didn't want to try and, go through too much of a stage demo. But I think at this point, when we've seen so much of Oculus, when Microsoft has pretty much supported every VR unit besides Morpheus, I think you have to do more than just say, this is still really a thing.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think in a different media market, they are doing something that could be really huge. PlayStation Vue is expanding into new markets much slower than we in Minneapolis, Minnesota would like them to be.
They never come to Minneapolis first.
I don't know why. But they are expanding into San Francisco and Los Angeles, I think this week, they said. And they're already in 5 other cities. The big news there was the a la carte channel option. Anybody who has Comcast, Time Warner, any of those people out there, you're always stuck with cable plans that are giving you 100 channels, but 87 of them you don't watch.
Yep.
If Sony can manage to provide a TV service that really delivers on that a la carte promise and lets us get the things we want to watch and pay for just the things we want to watch and keeps those prices manageable.
Yep. That's the big question mark still, how the pricing is going to work. But
yeah. If they're $10 a piece, that's not better.
No.
As it is, they only announced 3 a la carte channels. Showtime, I think, is one of the Fox Sports stations, and a new Machinima station. So not exactly the stellar lineup to roll out with. You'd like to see that they have like a dozen unique stations.
They did have one screen with a ton of icons for different channels, but who knows how quickly they're going to be brought into the fold or anything like that.
There has to be a lot of resistance from the cable companies who work with those
sure,
partners
they're doing
already.
Everything in their power, yes.
Yeah, to prevent it from happening. Call of Duty Black Ops 3 having some exclusive stuff only or first on PlayStation. What do you think that does to the Call of Duty market?
I mean, that is a big one. That had always been in Microsoft's camp. They had always gotten, the map packs first and whatever, and that has been a very big feather in their cap, and you always would hear from the Call of Duty fans, at least the ones on Xbox One, always took that as a source of pride, and the PlayStation 4 people always complained about it. So clearly, Sony has been maneuvering in the background, and now Activision is partnering with them. Like you said, it probably has a lot to do with the Destiny deal and how well that's been going. So,
yep. I also wonder how much of it is Microsoft wanting to keep the focus on their big first-person franchise, Halo coming, and maybe not wanting to too strongly support what is ultimately kind of competition.
Yep. I mean, and especially with the sci-fi, they're going more and more sci-fi in Call of Duty, and the gameplay is getting faster and faster.
We did pause to see a couple of really strong pieces on the 2 Star Wars games. Disney Infinity 3.0 having some exclusive stuff, this exclusive pack on PlayStation 1 month before the other consoles. Boba Fett is going to be initially exclusive on PlayStation for this kind of family-targeted Star Wars game that's coming out this year. And Battlefront had a second awesome demo. We saw some stuff earlier at EA that showcased this kind of Hoth-inspired level. This was more kind of like a desert location, and just looked amazing. I mean, visually just startling. And showing off kind of some of that mode that can be solo or co-op. I think they called it survival.
Yeah.
And that kind of closed things out. There was one flub at an unfortunate time as they closed the show. They had meant to have, I think it was Bruce Straley from Naughty Dog was out on stage, supposedly was going to play this demo of Uncharted. And it didn't.
If you had any doubts that it was pre-recorded,
that's right. I don't know if his controller was out of batteries or if something was wrong with his particular build. For people who are kind of in on how this stuff works, they usually set up at least one, if not two, backups backstage that are either already recorded versions of that demo or somebody else, quite literally somebody else, playing through the demo. And they can just switch the feed like you would switch on your TV. But when they got to the actual demo,
you forgot the flub pretty fast.
You
at
did.
That point.
That was an awesome demo that showcased. I think the biggest takeaway for me out of that, other than the fact that Naughty Dog can design some really amazing looking levels, is that they have just this remarkable talent to match a sort of narrative feel into interactive moments, right? The idea that you turn a corner and you instantly are getting this sort of slightly varied narrative response in the banter between the two characters who are in the Jeep. That reflects what's happening. They go over a jump and you hear, you hear them say something sarcastic to one another about going over that jump. And it makes it feel so alive and so genuine and so much like a movie that you're controlling.
And this was kind of different, too, to see such a vehicle segment like that.
Yeah.
I did not envy Bruce for having to play through that. I always wonder, because whenever you get chase sequences in Uncharted, I'm never that good. I always end up screwing something up, and then you have to rewind, 30 seconds or whatever, and keep on trying to do it. I wonder how smooth that's going to be when, you and me play through it, and it's our first time going through it.
We will see. But as a demo to just showcase the power that they're playing around with in Uncharted 4 is impressive. I thought it was a strong show closer, even with the flub. I think for me, I'm going to have to think about a little bit how I stand about how both Microsoft and Sony did. I will say that both conferences felt pretty strong.
Yeah. I think it is a far cry from what we, saw maybe 2 years ago when there was one clear winner. I think both of them have realized what they have to do to get fans on their side, and they've really been going after exclusives. They both focused almost exclusively on games, and I think they both had really good showings.
Yeah, which is good ultimately. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Who's going to win, Sony or Microsoft? At the end of the day, strong E3 press conferences from all of the publishers is really good for us, for gamers. It means that we've got a strong year ahead, and if these two major publishers for Microsoft and Sony are any indication, we are in for a very exciting 2015 and 2016.
Yeah, I think calling this one is going to come down to when the rest of our guys out in Los Angeles actually get to sit down with these demos and start playing through them and seeing, what was kind of demo magic during the press conference and what, is really intriguing for us normal gamers.
Absolutely. Well, that will close out our first full day of coverage of E3 2015. We had some Bethesda coverage last night that you can watch the recap of, but we'll also have recaps of all of today's press conferences for you to watch on GameInformer.com. And of course, starting tomorrow, we're going to have an seemingly endless number of previews and new information about the titles that we see on the show floor, in addition to some more press conferences that are rolling out tomorrow.
Yep.
So make sure and tune back in. In the meantime, have a great night, and thanks for watching.